Howdy, everybody, and welcome. Happy Wednesday. Welcome to another ForeFlight webinar. This is our Digital Sun and Fun presentations here. Today, we're going to be going over our Rusty Pilot webinar. This is going to help you guys get recurrent, get back up in the air. I think quite a few of us has probably not done as much flying recently. So this will be a great way to go through some of the tools and tips inside of ForeFlight that are going to help us get back up in the air, get recurrent, and get back flying airplanes. It's going to be good. My name is Thomas Daugherty. I am a product manager here at ForeFlight. I specifically focus on the Logbook project. And we're going to look at how Logbook can help us get current again and track that currency so we remain current. Before we begin, I want to go over a couple of things here in GoToWebinar. You guys have the ability to ask questions in our questions panel there. We've got our pilot support staff here answering questions. So if there's anything you need some clarification on, let them know and they'll get back to you. If you don't get a chance to ask your question and you want some help in how to do something in ForeFlight, we always have our pilot support team on frequency 7 days a week at team@foreflight.com. Fantastic team of pilots and ForeFlight experts to make sure that you can use ForeFlight to the fullest of its abilities, get you in the air. Fantastic team. A little intro into ForeFlight here before we get started. For those of you who aren't as familiar with us, ForeFlight was founded in 2007, so we've been around for quite a while now. We were one of the first apps in the App Store and have prided ourselves on building the #1 selling aviation app since 2010. So I want to start on using and getting an iPad. ForeFlight is an iOS application, so it runs on Apple iPads and iPhones. So if you've been out of flying for a while and you need to get a new device so that you can run ForeFlight on it, what sort of devices are going to be the best options for you? So the minimum spec that we recommend for an iPad is 128 gigs of storage on the device. That's going to allow you to download all of the data inside of ForeFlight, use it for whatever else you might need to in aviation, and have plenty of room left over. We recommend that you get the Wi-Fi plus cellular model of the iPad. The reason why we want you to get the cellular version is that it has a built-in GPS chip, so you can actually see your location using the iPad without having to add any external hardware, or is a great backup in there as well. You don't actually need to have like a cellular data plan for that device for that GPS chip to work. You just need to have that cellular model. As far as what size device works best for you, that's a personal choice of what works best in your airplane. I've seen pilots go so far as to look up the dimensions of each of the different devices and cut them out in cardboard and take it out to the aircraft and see which one fits best in the cockpit for them. I think that's a great idea to kind of get a sense of how it's going to fit for your operation. And we've got tons of good information at the foreflight.com/buying guide. Once you've got your shiny new iPad or your iPhone, you're going to want to go ahead and get the latest version of ForeFlight. And you can get that in the App Store on your device by searching for ForeFlight Mobile. And it's a ForeFlight Mobile EFB is the application you want to get. And that'll download the latest version, so you'll have that ready to go. Once you're all downloaded, now we're going to need to play around and navigate through ForeFlight so we understand exactly how to use it. When you launch ForeFlight for the first time, you're going to see the airports page. In the upper right-hand corner is a search box, and that's going to allow you to find your home airport or look up an airport you'd like to fly out of. And then along the bottom of the application, you'll see a bunch of tabs aligned in our tab bar. These are the different functions across ForeFlight. And so tapping through from airport to maps to plates is going to allow you to access those different features. In the far right of that tab bar is the More tab, and bringing that up will give you even more functionality inside of ForeFlight. So things like the logbook or weight and balance are often found here in the More tab. You'll also notice the downloads and settings at the very top of the More tab. We're going to be using some of those later, so that's where those can be found. Now, I do work on Logbook a good bit at ForeFlight here, and that's actually where we're going to start today, so that we can get ourselves brought over into a fully digital logbook and see what exactly we need to do to get recurrent. So ForeFlight's logbook is accessible across all of my devices. It actually saves everything that I might have. So if I log on my iPad, I can bring it up on my phone. I can access that off the web. It's fantastic. So I don't have to worry about losing my logbook anywhere. If I navigate to the logbook tab, and then along the left-hand side, go down to the qualifications list, this is where I can put in things like my certificates or any endorsements or ratings that I might have. So I'm going to hit the plus button in the upper right-hand corner and then select certificates. Once I've brought up that box, I can select whatever certificates I might have for my logbook. So usually a flight certificate and a medical certificate is a great place to start. So I may add my private pilot and my medical certificate so that those are saved inside of my logbook. Once I select the certificate that I need, I can just go ahead and fill in details like my certificate number. This is a great place to add ratings if I have any of those. You can also use that plus button we use to add a new certificate in the first place to add a rating later on. I can also take photos, and this means that I can grab a quick snap of my physical plastic license and have any additional details that might be on that saved along with my qualification. I use this for my medical a lot because there's a lot of extra information on there. Now that I've got my qualifications, I want to bring over all of my logbook entries into ForeFlight as well. Now, this can be a daunting task if you're still on a paper logbook, but there's a lot of benefits to bringing everything over into the digital world. So the first question that you need to ask yourself is, what is your goal moving forward with a digital logbook? Do you want to have a complete record of every flight you've ever made? That one's pretty easy. You just go through and enter in every single flight. But if you just want to carry forward your totals and move forward digitally from this point on, there's a couple of options there, and that can be a faster and easier route to get you to a digital logbook that still has a lot of value to you. If you choose to go that route, one of the questions you need to ask is, when do you want to carry your totals forward? You don't have to do all of your totals. You can maybe do your totals up to the last 6 months and then just bring forward every entry from that 6 months on. Maybe you just want your last 10 flights to be their own entry in your logbook, and everything else is just totaled. This has some benefits because it might, if you are already in the process of getting recurrent, you want those latest flights to be in your logbook digitally so that the currencies that you've earned in those last few flights are all there ready to go for you. Bringing your totals forward, you also have some options here. So you can do things like a page line summary, the normal totaling that we do at the bottom of a paper logbook. You can just carry it forward just like you were going to do from one paper logbook to another paper logbook. You just write in all of your columns. You can do time by aircraft type. So if you've got several different aircraft types and you've got time in each that you want to go ahead and bring forward, you can also just total up those types and bring that through. That's helpful for some of the reporting later on. And then you can also do time by tail number. If you only have a few aircraft in your logbook, it may make sense just to bring each of those aircraft forward digitally. And that's really helpful for reports because you can see the specifics in there. One question on a photo of a private pilot's license, will that be sufficient if, I were to get ramp checked or something like that? No, you'll still want your actual version of your license on there. You are still required to carry that in your photo ID and everything. The photo is just helpful for those details if you're, not actually flying the aircraft, getting ramp checked. So we're going to go ahead and carry some totals forward from my logbook into a brand new one here. And so the first thing I'm going to do is add an aircraft. So again, inside of logbook, along the left-hand side where we added qualifications, I'm going to go up to the aircraft section. This is going to allow me to go through and add details for each tail number I want in my aircraft. So all I need to do is put in the yellow highlighted information like type code or category class. The more information I put in here, the more information ForeFlight has to give me reports and currencies and things like that. So the most detail you can add, the better. The yellow items are the ones that are required for different reports. So I'm going to go through and, carry some flights forward. I'm going to, add those aircraft in. Why am I going to go through all of the trouble of setting up a digital logbook? The reason I'm going to do that is I now have a currency summary that lets me know exactly where I sit in my logbook against my standard currencies here. So I can see right away that my flight review, it's about to expire here. I've only got a few days left. My medical has plenty of time in there, but my night and IFR currencies definitely not an option in there. I want to point out that you can also do a lot of the digital logbook transition on web. This makes it a lot easier to go through each of those entries, add things line by line, available on plan.foreflight.com/logbook. Now we've really breezed over how to go digital there. And I want to point out that we have a couple of webinars just on going digital with your logbook inside of ForeFlight. A fantastic option to go through our foreflight.com/videos to get to our webinar library and look through either of those webinars to get tons of details on how to go digital in your logbook. But once we have those currencies, that's what we're after today. So I've got that flight review coming up, and I want to go ahead and study. I've been out of the air for a while. There's some new tech out there that I want to get up to speed with. I really want to, remind myself of regs. What is a good way that ForeFlight can help me get ready to be pilot in command again? Our ForeFlight Documents tab along the bottom of our tab bar there has tons of great ways for you to organize all of your aviation documents, and has the drives along the left-hand side that have pre-published information from any data provider that's on your subscription. And you'll notice that we've got FAA over there, and that's going to be really helpful as we want to get back in the air. Inside of that FAA drive, we actually have all of the published FAA documents for those US subscriptions in there. And we even have things like the handbooks folder down here, which contains all of these great things that we're used to seeing when we were first going through flight training, like the pilot's handbook, instrument flying handbook, even things like aeronautics for naval aviators. I don't have to buy any of these. These are all the latest, most up-to-date version of these documents. And so it's really easy for me to go back and reread about what is WAAS GPS and how does that actually work and how do I use that? Or I can go through and look at stuff like the ACS if I need to figure out what my, what requirements and what my standards are going to be to get back in the air. So I need to get ready for that flight review. And unfortunately, I've sort of forgotten what is all involved in a flight review. Is there a way to, get up to speed and give myself a checklist of items I'm going to need to do? In that same FAA drive we looked at earlier, there's another folder called Federal Aviation Regulations. This is actually the latest version of the FARs split up by part. So I have the whole FARs ready to go inside of that documents catalog for me. Part 91 has specific details on what I need to accomplish for a flight review. So I can tap into that part. Sorry, it's part 61. I can tap into the part there and then tap the search icon and look up flight review. And that'll go ahead and bring up all the portions of the book that include the word flight review and make it easy for me to dive in and see exactly what the requirements are. I also have the ability to tap the pencil icon. I can highlight things, I can make notes in there, and I can also use the bookmark icon to, give myself a shortcut to certain pages. This is a fantastic thing for an instructor. If you walk in and you've got, bookmarks and highlighting of particular FAR passages on there, that is such a great way to, show that you've been in the book studying, you're ready to go, you're interested in being a better pilot here. What about for my instrument proficiency? So I got to get an IPC done here too if I want to be instrument current. Well, again, in that FAA drive, I've got the ACS for instrument airplane. So right there, I don't have to go anywhere else other than ForeFlight to grab the latest copy of the ACS. If you're a pilot who got certified under the PTS, the ACS is a little different, and it's probably worth going through and looking at exactly what the requirements are and what the standards for each of these items are. But in the back, towards the back of the ACS here, I actually have a section specifically for instrument proficiency check. And that's going to point out exactly what I need to accomplish to get that IPC done. So I can go through and know, exactly what items I need to cross off so that I, can be an instrument pilot again. Once I have that checklist of items I'm going to need to do for my flight review or my IPC, I'm going to want to practice. And one of the best ways that I can actually practice using ForeFlight and kind of getting the flow of things down is to connect it to a flight sim. So we actually have the ability to connect ForeFlight directly to several popular flight sims, including the new Microsoft Flight Simulator, and fly around in the simulator and ForeFlight think that it's in the aircraft with me. Very handy for practicing a lot of these different tips and tricks that we're going to look at later, really get a handle on how to use ForeFlight. This is in the pilot's guide to ForeFlight Mobile. That is in the ForeFlight drive in the documents section. If you're looking for, some detailed instructions of how to connect to any of these simulators. We also have a webinar specifically on connecting to simulators, again, on our foreflight.com/videos. So another great tool to understand how to get yourself set up so that you can practice before you actually go out to the aircraft. Well, I've been out of the air for a little while, and I maybe have moved to a new city. I'm not familiar with as many of the airports around myself. I don't really understand what my local airspace looks like. Maybe I need some pointers in sort of studying on that. ForeFlight has got such a wealth of information on every airport out there. It's really easy to just go to the map and see my blue location dot, because I bought that iPad with the cellular in there so it knows where I am, and look at nearby airports. So I live here in Austin in Central Texas, and I've got a couple of airports nearby. I can tap on any of those airports, maybe San Marcos. Maybe I'm not quite ready to go out of Austin International here. I want a little smaller airport to start off with. I can tap on San Marcos. I can see details about the airport, like its taxi diagram, frequencies, understand when the tower is open, when it's closed. I can tap on the FBO's button, and I can see all of the see all of the different services that are available on that field. This is going to let me see what the up-to-date fuel prices are, understand if there's different flight schools there. I know that Texas State Aviation is one that I've used before. I can tap on that and get specific details about the services that they offer, get contact information. I can even look at comments from other ForeFlight users, see if they had a good experience there. Or I can add my own comment. Maybe I've got some great feedback for other ForeFlighters. So with this sort of information, I can understand a lot about what's at each of these airports around me and pick one that's going to work best for me for my flight training. So I've studied up. I understand what I need to do my my BFR and my flight review and my IPC here. So now I'm going to do some flight planning. I talked to an instructor at the flight school. They've got a plan for us. You know, we're going to go out and practice some landings, and I want to get ForeFlight set up for that VFR flight. So I'm going to tap the flight plan button. That's that little FPL in the upper bar of the Maps tab. And that's going to open the flight plan drawer. And this is where we're going to do a good bit of our flight planning today. I'm going to tap on my local airport that I want to fly out of. And it's going to open the information about that airport along the right. And then towards the top of that box, I have an Add to Route button. Tapping that Add to Route button now gives me a little route bubble in my flight plan drawer for the airport that I want to fly out of. Awesome. I've got my departure airport all set in my flight plan. Now, my flight instructor told me that we were going to fly over to Lockhart and practice some landings. I don't really know anything about Lockhart, and I'm not even sure really where it is on the map here. So I'm going to tap the search box in the upper right-hand corner, and then I'm going to type in the airport that I want to find. The best thing about that is I don't actually need to know the identifier of the airport. The search inside of ForeFlight is smart. So I can type in the city that the airport is in. I can type the common name like Lockhart Municipal, and ForeFlight's going to be able to bring up the correct airport for me. So there we go. I've got Lockhart Municipal Airport. That sounds like where we're probably going to go practice some landings. I'll tap that in the search to see details about it and see its location on the map, and then tap Add to Route to bring that airport as a new route bubble in. Now you'll see that I've got a destination and departure in my route plan, my flight plan. So now ForeFlight can go ahead and draw a direct to line between those 2 points. So that looks like a pretty reasonable flight for us. And I can start studying the charts. I can start understanding what terrain and obstacles is along that route and really get up to speed with where we're going to be flying. I can also tap the procedure button in the flight plan drawer to look up additional information. Now, we're not going to be flying an approach into this airport, but what we are going to fly is a traffic pattern. So I'm going to go into Procedure Advisor and select Traffic Pattern and see information about the runway at Lockhart. So I can see the dimensions, the surface conditions. I can see up-to-date weather and see how the winds are going to impact each runway with both headwind, tailwind, and crosswind information. And I can select the runway that's going to work best for us. Once I've selected a runway, I get additional information like traffic pattern altitude. I can see that this runway has left traffic or right traffic. And I can see that the 45 entry here is going to be our best option. So selecting that lets me get a preview of how that will be impacted by our route. And then I can tap Add to Route and bring that traffic pattern directly into my flight. You'll notice that it also highlights the center line for that runway. This is also helpful so that I sort of get an understanding of where traffic might be if they are flying an approach into the runway, or just have that additional situational awareness. In the upper left-hand corner of the map, I have the layer selector. Tapping the layer selector is going to let me bring up things like the US VFR sectional, IFR low, or in this case, the aerial map. And I'm going to bring that on top of my route. I love this for flying into airports that I'm a little bit less familiar with, because I can see exactly where my traffic pattern is going to cross landmarks and terrain along the ground. So I can see that as I approach the highway here, that's when I'm probably going to start my 45 entry. And I can look for fields and terrain that are going to keep me separated from the runway enough. really plan out that traffic pattern so I'm very comfortable when I fly into a brand new airport. I've got an even better way to preview that airport though. I can tap the 3D view in the airport menu here. So I've tapped on the airport and then I'm selecting 3D view. And I can actually look at that aircraft or that same imagery overlaid on top of 3D terrain. This also shows me traffic flying in the area. So I can pan and zoom around the airport. I can line myself up on each runway on an approach and see what my sight picture is going to look like. I can watch terrain or watch traffic fly into the airport here so that I can kind of get a sense of where I need to be looking for as we fly in. This is such a great airport familiarization tool. It is in our performance package, but worth it to be able to preview airports with this level of detail. One more thing that I want to look at on our VFR flight planning here. In the flight plan drawer, where we've been looking at our route bubbles and where we selected procedures, in the lower right-hand corner, I've got Profile. This is on our Pro Plus subscriptions. This is going to allow me to see my route and see all of the terrain, obstacles, and airspace along that route. Even more stuff's in there too. And this is a great pre-brief for, Central Texas, not the heaviest terrain to worry about, but I might have a tower. I might have airspace that I'm not planning for. And this really lets me see exactly what's along that route. So I know before we walk out to the aircraft that we're good to go. Nothing's worse than, you get to cruise and you suddenly start to worry about if I checked for all the obstacles along the route. Those are just a couple of quick VFR flight planning tips. We actually have a lot more in our fundamentals webinar. So I recommend checking that out if you are very new to ForeFlight. That's a great way to get up to speed with even more of the flight planning tools that are available to you. But for now, let's move on to the IFR portion. So again, I talked to my instructor about getting ready for my IPC, and my instructor wants me to go ahead and plan out a route between San Marcos and down to Corpus Christi, a little bit further of a route, and I'm going to need to exercise my IFR flight planning knowledge a little bit more. ForeFlight's going to make it easy for me. So here's our two airports. I've added them as route bubbles. So I have San Marcos and Corpus Christi. And I can see right away on our aeronautical map that it looks like I've got some airspace in the way. I'm going to need to do a little bit of planning. One thing that might help with that is to look at the IFR low. So I can again pull up my layer selector and look at the IFR low chart and see if it's got any notes. Look at my airways, look at things like that in a format that I might be a little bit more familiar with. That profile view is going to be useful for us as well. Again, because it shows airspace, I can see exactly where I might be impacted by some of those MOAs around San Antonio and around the Air Force bases. I can tap on that airspace and get details about it. So I know the name now. I can see the altitude. So maybe all I need to do is drop down below 7,000. I see it highlighted on the map. So I can, study exactly how that's going to impact my route. Maybe it's just a little sliver of it that I need to skirt around there. Or maybe I'm flying right through the middle of it and we're going to need to find another way. I can press and hold on the map as well and get even more details about that airspace. Great for looking up the frequency, looking up when things are active. So I can see if an MOA is even going to impact us because it might not be active when we're going flying. But let's say that I want to just go ahead and get completely around that airspace. I don't want to have to worry about it today. The routes button in the flight plan drawer can really help with that. And it's going to give us a lot of great options for how we get between our two airports. That brings up our route advisor. And the route advisor is ForeFlight automatically doing the planning for me. So I can see different types of routes from a recommended to ATC cleared, things that other pilots have flown between these two airports, all the way down to airway. The recommended route which is available in our Performance Plus packages, is a great option. That is actually our supercomputers going through and looking at the winds and temperatures aloft, looking at your specific aircraft performance, and looking at previously cleared ATC routes between those two airports, and combining all of that information together to give you the best option on the day for your specific flight, and getting you as a cleared as filed when you walk out to the aircraft. Fantastic tool, especially if you're going to be doing a lot of long cross countries. Because we're just doing a training flight today, I'm actually going to go all the way down to the Airways tab. And ForeFlight's going to go ahead and give me a route along Airways between those two airports. This is really handy as a starting point. So now I've kind of got a route between the airports. I can, see how this is going to impact that airspace I'm worried about. I can look for other obstacles. It's a great place to start on two airports that I've never flown between, so that I don't have to go through and search for every possible airway that might get me down there. The procedure button that we looked at earlier for traffic patterns also has all of our approaches and our departure procedures and arrival procedures, and makes it a lot easier for me to plan how I'm going to enter or handle each of those procedures. So today we're going to select approach. I can see all of the approaches available at Corpus. I can see the best winds for each of those. So we're taking the METAR in and telling you what runway has the best winds into it. ILS seems like a good thing. I had to do a precision approach anyways. I can then see all of the transitions to that procedure overlaid with my route on top of the procedure itself. So I have my plate, I have my route, and I have the route along that transition for the procedure all being shown to me here. Great way to understand how we're going to enter everything, how I'm affected by procedure turns or holds, or even things like the MEA around a particular approach. I even have a new section down here called minimums. This lets me write notes in to actually see, exactly, remind myself what my minimums are based off of my category of aircraft and the type of approach that I'm flying. I'm going to add that to route, and ForeFlight's going to bring it over to the maps page for me, where I can then overlay things like traffic or weather radar, things that are situational awareness tools that help me stay ahead of the aircraft. That way I always have, I'm not getting caught out by traffic or weather. My plate's right there along with my route. It's really easy to understand exactly where we are in the aircraft. One more way that I can preview this so that I'm briefed and ready to go is to hit the little 3D globe icon there in the flight plan drawer. And that actually allows me to preview my flight, including my approach, outside of the aircraft, overlaid on top of the terrain. So I can go through and see, how steep is my turn after my initial approach fix here. I can see altitudes at my intermediate fixes. This is such a great briefing tool so that I understand exactly how this approach is laid out before I get out in the aircraft and have to put the hood on. So I like that route. I feel pretty good about our approach. I think we're going to be pretty much ready to walk out to the airplane here. But I've been doing everything on the internet, just at my house for my pre-planning here. And I need to make sure that everything is good to go on my iPad before I walk out to the aircraft. And we're going to use Pack, the feature inside of ForeFlight, to make sure that everything is downloaded onto my device so I have it ready to go in flight. So in my flight plan drawer, I've got this little suitcase icon. Probably has a little red badge next to it. And that red badge is telling me that there's things that I need to download before I walk out to the aircraft. Tapping on that is going to bring up our Pack window. Pack is going to look at everything that I already have downloaded on my device, everything that I might need for my flight based on my route, and tell me what I have left to download so that I have everything ready to go, on my device. So when I'm not connected to the internet, I don't have any fuzzy charts or plate missing that I might need. All I need to do is hit the pack button in the lower right-hand corner, and it'll bring everything onto my device. A common question we get is then how do I access all of that packed data? And the best thing is I don't have to do anything different to access it. I can view it just like I view a normal chart or a normal plate just by bringing that up inside of ForeFlight. And all of that data is removed off of my device once it's expired. So I don't have to worry about packing over and over again, taking up too much space, even on my 128 gig iPad. That gives me a little notification. I'm ready to walk out to the airplane, and I'm all good to go. Plate binders is a new feature that we released inside of ForeFlight, and it's going to allow me to get all of my procedures in an organized fashion for our IPC. So I'm going to tap the Add Flight Binder button on the Plates tab along the bottom, and ForeFlight's going to suggest a route either from Maps or from Flights for me. So I'm going to select the one from Maps. And now I've got a way to organize all of the plates from my airport diagram, my departure, my approach. All of that is brought across in here. You'll notice that it pre-fills almost all of my information in here because we already selected a lot of that in our route. I've got my NOTAMs box at the top, letting me know of NOTAMs that impact that specific procedure. So I can go through and, I know that the VORTAC is out of service. Not going to go ahead and request it. I can tap the airport over on the side here, and I can see, switch it over to a different airport if we're going to divert or fly somewhere else. And I can tap on any of the categories and see different options or load in multiple approaches. Quick pro tip here, you can swipe left or right with 3 fingers on a plate in the plate view to actually switch back and forth. Another great way to move through your plates once you've got them organized in your plate binder. We've got our route, and we are going to be flying IFR, so we'll go ahead and file this flight plan. It's good to file those VFR ones as well, but we'll definitely need the IFR flight plan filed. On the flight plan drawer here in Maps, I've got a little square with an up arrow. That's our send to icon, always a good one to keep an eye out for. And one of the options in there is to send this to flights. It's going to take my route and send it over to the flights tab inside of ForeFlight. This is also a great place to do some flight planning if you know your destination and your departure. And I can add things, like fuel plans and tons of great information in the flights tab. We're not going to go too deep into that today, though. We are going to look at the briefing button at the top. That allows me to get a briefing saved onto my iPad. There's a record that I've received it, and it's got some great ways of visualizing information along that flight that I don't have to go through and look quite as hard as we used to on big paper printouts of things. One of my favorites here is in the TAF section on forecasts. It actually highlights the portion of the TAF that applies to me based on my route and my departure time. So I can know, if I'm in the LIFR or the IFR section of the TAF as we fly through. Might not be the best time to go fly, or maybe I just need to delay for a few minutes. Tons of great info. In the lower right-hand corner of the Flights tab, I have a Proceed to File button. So gone are the days of me needing to call up a briefer to, struggle to get the correct state selected, and then, talk somebody through over the phone what I need a briefing for, and then do the same thing to file. ForeFlight's going to handle all of that for me. It's going to take all of my route details, information about my aircraft, and it's going to pre-fill out my ICAO flight plan form for me and let me just hit file in the lower right-hand corner to send that off to the FAA. There's tons of benefits to filing here with ForeFlight, like getting alerts that changes in conditions to your route to get expected route clearance times, things like that. Awesome way to file. You don't even have to put your route somewhere else. So we're filed, and there's one extra thing I'm going to take out to the aircraft with me here before we go flying, and that is a portable ADS-B unit. And I'm going to bring the Sentry. This is ForeFlight Sentry product with me, and it's going to give me information that I could have never gotten in the aircraft just a short time ago. Things like ADS-B weather, dual band ADS-B traffic, It's got an even more accurate GPS, so I can get better location information for my aircraft. It's got a built-in AHRS unit, Attitude Heading Reference System unit, in there that's going to give me pitch and bank as I go through. It's even got a carbon monoxide sensor. So these are available from ForeFlight. Awesome piece of kit to have in the aircraft with you, and really changes. You won't want to fly without it after you fly with a Sentry. So we're filed. I've got my ADS-B unit. We're going to walk out in the airplane and fly our IPC. And there's a couple of things and tools inside of ForeFlight that are going to give me additional situational awareness. One of the hardest things when you're just getting back into the aircraft is staying ahead of that airplane. We all worked so hard when we were initially getting certified for it. And now we're going to use some new tools to help us get there a lot faster as we get recurrent. So on the maps page, I'm going to tap the settings gear along the top, and that's going to have a lot of tools that are available for me in flight. You can learn about a lot of these in that pilot's guide we looked at under the Documents tab. The first one I want to point out here is called Distance Rings. Turning this on gives me rings around my aircraft in flight at regular intervals so that I can see exactly how far I am away from a waypoint or an airport. And it's even got that little green arrow along the lines that show me what my ground track is. So I can see if I'm actually lined up to, make the waypoint that I'm flying towards here, or if I need to adjust my course so that my track gets me where I want to go. You can also adjust the distance ring styles by going to More and Settings. That's the More tab in the settings we looked at. And then looking up distance ring styles. And I can set this to a bunch of different stuff. My favorite in here is time. I really like flying with this, particularly flying into uncontrolled airports, because it helps me sort of get a better understanding of how close we are to needing to do things like our before landing checklist. I have a tool called Glide Advisor. This is going to allow me to, adjust my glide ratio and my best glide speed, and then see a ring around my aircraft that's going to take into account my altitude, my terrain, the winds aloft forecast, and show me where I'm going to be able to glide the aircraft to if I had some sort of engine failure. On a flight review, if you've done one, I think you can be pretty assured that you're going to be practicing some power failure and some engine failure checklists there. This is a great tool to, not say that I'm going to glide the aircraft all the way over to Temple Airport. That's way outside of my glide ring. Very handy tool to have as you fly around. The ruler on the maps page. You can bring this up by tapping 2 fingers onto the map at the same time. And it's got a lot of great things like metrics for how long it will take me to fly to the other side of the ruler here based off of my current speed. Helpful for diversions, helpful for just any kind of, in-flight planning that I might need to do. But there's a kind of a power tip that we can use here by combining this with the profile view that we looked at earlier. As I slide the ruler around on the map, the profile view actually updates to show me the details underneath that ruler. So if I am in, let's say, a more mountainous area and I'm trying to plan a diversion, or I know that I have tall obstacles around, using the ruler and profile view together like this can help me clear that route of flight before I, suggest a less than optimal diversion for us. I have my checklist built directly inside of ForeFlight in the checklist tab. We have a whole library of POH checklists available in there. You can also edit it and or make your own for your aircraft. I like to add additional things about checking my track log or looking for my EFB, using things like that in the checklist. So great option to have. And it also has a feature called Checklist Speak. So here we are looking at an engine partial power loss checklist for the aircraft, and I can hit the checklist speak button and ForeFlight will read out the individual items to me. So it'll read out fuel pump boost, fuel selector switch tanks. And if I have a Bluetooth headset, I can actually get those directly into my headset. It's like having your own co-pilot going through with some CRM, looking at exactly what you need to do. So if you've not practiced some of these in a while, this is a great way to get up to speed and then have that in the aircraft so that you can focus on actually doing the actions for each of this. You can annotate a lot of things inside of ForeFlight. We looked at it with documents, but you can actually add annotations to your plates. I like to put notes or highlight things that are specific to me, maybe highlight some minimums or a particular obstacle, or give myself a reminder to perform a particular checklist or watch out for a hazard along an approach. Or I can annotate on the map. So I can write myself notes, just like used to planning on paper charts. I can write things like, this is where I want to switch my fuel. This is where I want to switch frequencies. And those annotations actually stay in place on the map. So as I pan and zoom around, they stay right where I wrote them. So I can make myself checklists like that. I have synthetic vision. So if we are flying approaches, we've not done that in a while, I can actually hit the little attitude indicator icon and bring up a view of what's outside of the aircraft. So I can see my airport, my runways, I can see traffic and obstacles and terrain all highlighted for me so that I'm really able to see exactly where I'm going, make sure I'm lined up on the correct approach, things like that. This pairs great with Sentry and the ability, the AHRS unit ability to give me pitch and bank information. If I have an instructor who wants to give me an attitude header, attitude indicator failure on my flight, good luck. I'll just bring up my synthetic vision here and have that instrument backed up and ready to go, so I keep wings level. So we had a good IPC and a good flight review, but the main purpose of those, those flights and those checks is to make sure that we're still proficient, that we're still learning how to fly the aircraft. And so we're going to make sure we have a good debrief with our instructor of things we need to work on, things that maybe on the next flight, if we want to go through a couple of different training flights to really get up to speed, things we want to do better next time. And ForeFlight's got a host of tools that will allow me to debrief post-flight with my instructor way better than I used to be able to, just by saying, hey, remember that third landing that wasn't as good. So my recorded track log is going to automatically make a draft entry inside of the logbook for that last flight. And I can tap on the map there to bring up specific details about that track log. So here we are looking at an actual flight review from a couple of years ago. I can zoom in and see specific details like my altitude and my speed as I fly around and do some practice landings. Maybe my instructor forgot to count all of the landings as we were going through there. It's not much of a problem for us. It's pretty easy to go through and see exactly how many landings we did on this flight as we go through. I can see, look at the consistency. We can even see which one of these was a short approach for me. Really powerful debriefing tool with your instructor. But we can go a step further and look at that again in 3D by tapping the 3D button. And now we can review our maneuvers, again, overlaid with terrain and satellite imagery. So we can look at a procedure turn here where we're, what was our altitude like? What was our bank like? How could we fly that better next time? Very powerful tool. We started with logbook, making sure that we had what our currency was like and what we needed to do to get recurrent. And we've gone and we've done all those flights. We're going to make sure that we log that correctly so that our currencies reflect it. So I mentioned that draft entry created by recording the track log, and that's going to have most of the information we need to log this flight all ready to go in it. So I can scroll down and see things like my departure and destination. I can see my total time automatically filled in, number of landings that I had on a particular flight. I can add approaches to go through and add comments and details on each of those approaches. I've got this use button on many of the fields throughout logbook, and that's going to be a fast way for me to go through and say, yeah, well, this whole flight was dual received. So the total time of 1.4, I'll just use that for dual received. Tapping that button automatically fills it in for me. I don't have to type the same thing over and over again. I can go down to the instructor signature section, and my instructor can either sign this remotely or on the device right when we're there post-flight. I can bring up my instructor's information. Once I've entered in things like their name, email, and CFI number, that stuff's saved in my contacts, so it's faster to do it on subsequent flights. I don't have to have them re-enter everything every time. They can just hit the sign button and go through and sign digitally, just like we would do on cash register or many other things that we need to sign. Signing that's going to lock everything above the signature. So I can't then go back and give myself more total time or more dual given. We also have the flight tags section right underneath the instructor signature, and I can actually add this after the fact. And this includes things like flight review and IPC. These flight tags inside of my ForeFlight logbook are only for ForeFlight to sort of track currency for things. So to know that this flight was a flight review, or to know that it was an IPC. These flight tags are not the endorsement that I need to legally have completed either of these items. These are only for ForeFlight and the tracking. To add those endorsements, I'm going to go back to the qualifications where we first started today, hit the plus button in the upper right-hand corner, and select endorsement. Once that pops up, I have a lookup box here that's going to allow me to go through and select any of the endorsements that are in AC 6165H. So I've got all of that ready to go. My instructor doesn't have to remember the exact text for each of those endorsements. You can also add a photo. This is a great thing to do if you're adding previous endorsements from your paper logbook as you're going digital. You're not going to have an instructor sign it. They've signed the paper version. You can just take a picture of that and put that into your logbook. Once my instructor has selected the correct endorsement, it's going to pre-fill in a whole bunch of that text. So they just need to go through and put my name, my certificate, whatever other information they need in there, and they don't have to have they don't have to type everything out. It's a really handy tool to have as an instructor. They can then sign it, locks the endorsement for me, and I'm all ready to go. Now I have legally completed my flight review or my IPC. So there's about 50 minutes to get all the way through from digital logbook to some flight planning to some in-flight tools. There is so much in ForeFlight. It is such a powerful tool to have in the aircraft with us, and there are always ways to learn more. Just like we're doing these flight reviews to get current and to become better pilots, we want to continue to learn more about ForeFlight and how we use it. So a couple of ways for you to do that. You're doing one right now is fantastic, is to attend webinars that we host pretty regularly here at different events and see what new features are out there and what new tools you can be using in the aircraft. We have the pilot's guide, again, in the documents catalog, and that's going to allow you to go through and see, exactly what is the, what's the key for radar, what does each of the returns actually symbolize? One of the things I really like here is to go to the very back of the pilot's guide and look at the change log. That lets me get caught up on maybe the newest things in the last couple of versions of ForeFlight. I've got foreflight.com/videos. That's our video library. I've pointed that out a couple of times here. There are so many great resources there, from feature highlights that we put out, just on how to use a new feature, to these full-length webinars. That's where you're going to find things like our fundamentals, our advanced webinar, or things like our logbook or simulator webinar. Tons of great information, a lot easier to follow along with. We also have our blog and our newsletter. These are helpful for getting updates from ForeFlight. One of the big ones here is we clear all of the versions of iOS but to work with ForeFlight. That way, when you update the operating system on your iPad, that you're not going to have any issues with ForeFlight. So you can subscribe to those to get the all clear from ForeFlight. And the last one here, we pointed this out earlier on, but this pilot support team at ForeFlight is something we really are proud of. These are all pilots. They're all ForeFlight experts. The best thing about having an all pilot support team like this is you don't even need to know exactly what is wrong in ForeFlight or what you're trying to use, you can tell them what you want to do in the air and tell them that you're trying to, switch between plates on the mist for for your IPC, and they'll have tons of great tips for how you can do that better. Fantastic resource as part of being a ForeFlight customer. So please reach out to them, team@foreflight.com, and they'll be able to answer all your questions in how to use ForeFlight or help you out with your account, anything like that. So that's all we have for the webinar today. Looking through a couple of the questions in here. So is there a way to do data entry work on Logbook on my desktop and then upload it to ForeFlight on my iPad? Yeah, that's one of the great things about Logbook being also on the web is I can do things like import a logbook from a CSV directly into my logbook, or use my keyboard, my monitor, my mouse, my full desktop setup. A little easier to type on sometimes than just trying to type on an iPad for putting in all of those entries. So another great tool to use as you're going digital. Is there a way to upload digital copies of a POH for specific aircraft? Yes, that is a great thing to do. I do that for most of my aircraft. You can grab a PDF copy of the POH from either the manufacturer or a buddy who happens to have one. You can upload that remotely through something like Dropbox connected to your ForeFlight account, or you can just bring that onto your iPad directly through things like AirDrop or iTunes through there to upload that data, and then it's saved on your device where you can set bookmarks and set annotations for it. Tons of great things. When looking at Procedure Advisor, does an icon show you where you are on the map when approaching the field, or is it just an image of the traffic pattern? That one's mostly, it's going to bring it across onto the map. It's going to show how your route impacts that. So it's not something to necessarily use while you're flying into the traffic pattern, but it's going to show you how your route to that point is affected by it. So it still helps a lot with the planning there as I go through. Once I have it on the map, that route onto the map, that's the thing to use to see how close you are to the traffic pattern and when you're approaching the field. Is there a sectional legend you can pull up in ForeFlight just like on the paper charts? There actually is. This is a great thing if you're trying to practice, read some information on the sides of the map here. I'm going to set myself up here a little bit and then switch over to a live iPad here. So I'm on my maps page and I've brought up the sectional, and then I'm looking at the settings gear at the top. And down pretty far near the bottom, I've got an option called Map Touch Action. Selecting that is going to give me a couple different things here. So I can bring a chart to front or bring a chart to front with legends. One of the things we do when we stitch together all of the sectional charts inside of ForeFlight is we need to make some cuts along the edges. Things don't always line up exactly like we'd like them. So we spend a lot of time making sure that we're not covering data or anything like that, but there are some overlaps in those charts. Bringing charts forward with legends actually allows me to select an individual sectional, just like it were the paper version, including all of the legend information along the side. So I can see exactly, what sectional this is. And importantly, something that is hard to sometimes find other places is information on frequencies or special use airspace along the side. In the FAA documents, there's actually a specific, like a generic legend of some of the information along the top here. So if you're just looking for what a particular symbol means, sometimes that's a little bit easier. But if you're looking for details specific to a single sectional, that's the easiest way to do it. Once you've got all of that information done, you can always go back into your Map Touch Actions, set that to no action, and it'll be just like the legend was never there. So that's our time for today. Thanks everyone for attending, asking your questions. Hopefully everybody had a chance to get your question answered in the support here. If you haven't, or if you have any additional questions, again, please reach out to our pilot support team so that they can, give you good details and guides on how to get through stuff inside of ForeFlight. We've got a couple of other Sun and Fun webinars coming up this week, posted on our website, so keep an eye out for those. There's going to be some good ones in there, definitely worth attending. That's it for me. Thanks, everyone.